Welcome to the Fantasy Football Forge. My name is Steve, and today is the Saturday special, coming out a day early as soon as I can get it out. I'm recording this a little bit later than I wanted to. So, let's get moving. In this episode, I will go over the injury report, followed by a quick update of the matchup from last night, from Thursday night, and then I will recap any major headlines, and there's just really one overarching theme for this week, which is the weather, and also we will go through my Steel's stock scraps, which is like a bold takes / stardom situm portion. If you would like to see my complete rankings, they are up at the website, www.theffforge.com. There's a link down in the description to that, and otherwise I would just like to get this out. So let's get moving along, starting off with the quarterbacks for the injury report. I may miss some players in the injury report this week. My apologies if so, and of course, as I'm recording this, there are many more to be yet announced, but with the Saturday slate, we've got to get things moving or nobody will ever see this video. So, starting off with the out quarterbacks, we have Jalen Hurts, Mike White, Ryan Tannehill, Lamar Jackson, Matt Ryan, all has been benched. It appears I didn't take out any New York Jets or Jaguars players, so they're going to be in here as well. Then, as far as quarterbacks that have been ruled in or are going to be starting, are Gardner Minshew, Malik Willis, Tyler Huntley, Kenny Pickett, Nick Foles. Feels incomplete. I know, like Trace McSorley. Yeah, it'll be a fun quarterback week. Now on to the running backs, and I don't have any notable names ruled out yet, at least surprising names, none doubtful, but questionable. Kenneth Walker is expected to play, but he is still questionable as of now. Najee Harris, Damian Harris, Latavius Murray, and Jeff Wilson is hopeful to be playing. And then there was some sort of slight scare for Nick Chubb earlier in the week, but if you saw that and haven't seen any update, Nick Chubb is good to go. He will be playing. As far as the wide receivers go, Chris Olave has been ruled out. Same with Jarvis Landry, Nico Collins, Devontae Parker, Tyler Lockett, all out. But questionable here. Corey Davis did play yesterday. Deontay Johnson was a do not participate in the Thursday practice, so keep your eyes on that in case. Then Jacoby Myers, Kadarius Toney, Mecole Hardman, and Brandon Cooks are also all questionable. As far as Brandon Cooks go, he is set to play. A lot of air quotes on that one. Now onto the tight ends, and Noah Fant should be able to play, but he is questionable. It was a little bit less of a sure thing as the likely to play for Ken Walker, so keep an eye on that if you're going to be playing Noah Fant. And then Hayden Hurst is also questionable. Hopefully we'll be playing this week. Let's move on to the Thursday night matchup where Jacksonville handled the New York Jets for the most part here, 19-3. As far as Jacksonville goes, Ingram continues his tear at tight end, so that was great to see as someone that you may have because of me. Hopefully, you have not sat him also because of me in the very recent history, but he's been doing great, so that's great to see. Then ETN looked fine enough in a tougher matchup. The game flow was kind of odd, especially throughout the second half in this game, and so it just didn't end up resulting in a good game for ETN. You know, it's not like he had an excellent game on the ground, but for the most part, I mean, he looked fine when he got his opportunities. So I wouldn't be overly concerned about how he performed this week. And then the big story for the New York Jets was Chris Devler came in and replaced Zach Wilson in the mid-third quarter time frame, around like 9 minutes left. So Mike White should be back for the championship next week. That's the hope. Other than that, as far as real-world football goes. Now onto the headlines, and I don't have a whole lot of big headlines here. Jarvis Landry was put on the IR. George Pickens is ill, but he was not on the report. So do keep an eye on that to make sure that George Pickens does recover from his illness and comes back. He's just sick, and they're expecting him to be able to come back for the game this weekend. And now to the weather, and what I did is I've broken them down into how much they should be affecting the fantasy football landscape here. And right up top, this is extreme. The New Orleans versus Cleveland game sounds like is going to be absolutely terrible weather-wise, terrible for fantasy production. So I would be very cautious as far as at least some of the positions for those teams goes this week. I will have at least one position will be found in my steel stock scrap. So let's move on to the Buffalo versus Chicago game, and that floats somewhere between extreme and not so great. So the weather is bad enough that it should have an impact on the game flow, on the play calling in this game. That's about it. It's not something that it could be played through to some level of success, especially for these two teams. We've seen Buffalo just trust the arm of Josh Allen through bad weather before and do fine. Plus, he gets a lot of his value on the ground, so slight downgrade to receiving options. And then Chicago really doesn't have any receiving options outside of Cole Kmet, and I would think those short passes should still be successful. And I guess slight stock up to like a David Montgomery. Then Cincinnati versus New England, Atlanta versus Baltimore, Las Vegas versus Pittsburgh, Houston versus Tennessee. The weather's pretty bad in those games, but it shouldn't be impacting the game on an every down basis. It'll be more like on probably, fewer deep throws depending on the weather at that time in the game type of situation, as well as just kicking could be tough to trust, and of course those deep throws could be tough to trust. It'll impact the game in spurts is kind of what I gather, just mostly due to gusts more so than like a constant high wind. And then Detroit versus Carolina, Seattle versus Kansas City. Both have poor weather, but it shouldn't really be a huge detriment to fantasy value in those games. They should be able to play through it. And so now is on to the Steel Stock Scrap portion, the Stardom Situm. And I will also be providing a DFS value play based on FanDuel pricing at the bottom. And for each of these, for the steals, for the stocks, for the scraps at each position, and for the value, I will be rating how I did last week. Now, I had 2 very good weeks in a row. So if you recall last week at the start of this, I said that I'm going to try to ruin that the best that I could with the picks that I had. I leaned into the bold takes last week, and that will show in how I did. But ultimately, it really wasn't a terrible week, and I'll take that away for the more bolder takes that I did have. So as you can see, for these steals, for the tight end position last week, only one of them counted for grading myself, and I did bad on that one. This week, I'm going to, I think, maybe go back to the well here. I don't know. On Daniel Bellinger, I have him ranked 15th. The ECR on him is 23rd, going up against Minnesota. It's a really good matchup. I expect there to be plenty of points, especially in a week where weather's going to be affecting a lot of other games. And so that only makes me more confident. I don't think that really changed where I had him ranked ultimately, except for maybe 1 or 2 tight ends that would have moved behind him. But yeah, I like Daniel Bellinger a fair bit for a touchdown, if nothing else, this week. And, a few catches at least. But I think there's some really good upside too in this game for him. So sticking my neck out there once again for DB. Then Dallas Goedert's coming back this week. I have him ranked 4th, ECR is 9th, going up against Dallas. Gardner Minshew was able to make James O'Shaughnessy a viable fantasy option, okay, at tight end. You don't know who James O'Shaughnessy is. Now I'm saying it wrong. But yeah, he likes his tight ends, so I'm not expecting some huge drop in production here for Dallas Goedert when he comes back, unless, of course, there's some sort of reports as far as his usage being extremely limited or something. Then you might want to stay away. So let's move on to the stock options for the tight end. And last week I did mixed, which means I did good and I did bad, 1 each. So this week we're going to try and do good times 2. With Gerald Everett, who I've ranked 14th, ECR's 13th, going up against Indianapolis. This is more of I believe this is more of a heeding warning to a guy like Gerald Everett this week. He's been great all season. The Chargers like their tight ends, but they do have 2 of them now. They do have all of their receiving options at full. So the reliance on Gerald Everett is less the faith in him having a great week each and every week is over with at this point. So just, check out the rankings, see if there isn't somebody else that you might be able to play ahead of him, but still not a bad option either. Then Taysom Hill, I've ranked 12th, ECR is 12th, going up against Cleveland, and I could really see him getting a lot of work this week in a very terrible weather game. It would make sense. I did think there was 1 week where it would make sense to have a more Taysom Hill heavy game. I don't think that was for weather reasons though, and that didn't come true. So it's taken a guess at game script, at game calling, and that's why I have Taysom Hill ranked 12th. The experts probably have him ranked 12th because he just had a big week, his second big week of the season. That's not as exciting to me. That obviously helps, but that's not as exciting to me as the potential for him to just have a lot more work than normal. Then let's move on to the scraps for the tight end position. And last week I did bad. However, one of the players I did end up updating in my rankings prior to kickoff, which, by the way, you can come and visit me 1 hour prior to kickoff live on here on YouTube, and for any start-sit questions, I'll be there. It's kind of early. I'm struggling on the speaking end here. So as far as the scraps go, I have Chig Okonkwo down here. I have him ranked 25th. What is that? 9 spots behind the ECR, going up against Houston, and it comes down to the quarterback. I'm expecting them to be running a lot. Treylon Burks is back, and they have Malik Willis in at quarterback, which very much scares me away from this situation. So I'm not too excited about Chig this week, unfortunately. And I really hate the fact that I have both of these names down here. David Njoku I also have down here. This just comes straight down to the weather. 6 spots behind the ECR there. I have him 16th, ECR's 10. Yeah, that very much concerns me, especially for David Njoku, who's not necessarily a big, short, within 5 lines of scrimmage tight end. He is a bigger play tight end as well, and so that concerns me a little bit more for him than it might for like a Juwan Johnson even. Although he's had plenty of big plays too, hasn't he? On to the DFS value plays. Last week I did have several names down here, and all in all I did not do bad necessarily, but I did not do good enough to help you win the $1 million in a big tournament or something like that. I do want to point out I did predict the Tegan Quintoriano touchdown, so go me. Now on to this week. Donald Parham Jr. is going to be out there for super cheap, and he is a guy who could definitely give you a top 12 type of game. And so if you really, really needed to save on some cash at the tight end position, keep scrolling on down and you'll find Donald Parham down there. And then Daniel Bellinger is obviously somebody that I like this week. So for the price, I like him for DFS. Now let's move on to the quarterbacks. And for the quarterback steals, last week I did bad. So let's do better this week with Kirk Cousins, who I have 3 spots ahead of the ECR. The ECR is 7th. I have him at 4th, going up against the New York Giants. Obviously, I kind of like players in that game. I'm expecting it to be more of a back and forth game than not, and so lots of potential for fantasy points there. Then Sam Darnold, I have 2 spots ahead of the ECR. I have him ranked 17th. The ECR is 19th. For the quarterbacks, for the tight ends, very largely, actually, I think for like pretty much all the positions, maybe the least, the running backs, I was in agreement very much so with the experts in a lot of cases. That's the reasoning here for Sam Darnold getting on here. And so going up against Detroit, looked at the starting percentages of players. I didn't write any of them down this week, but that felt like a name where there were some guys who are ranked behind him who you just might want to think of playing Sam Darnold, unfortunately. And that's about as much praise as I want to give a name like that. So let's move on to the stocks. And last week I had mixed results. I did good, I did bad. Let's try to do good twice with Daniel Jones here, who both the experts and I have ranked 10th, going up against Minnesota. Should be a good game. A lot of questions at quarterback this week, so should feel pretty confident putting him out there and hopefully getting you a top 12 week. Shouldn't be too tough this week. In one where there might be lower scores than normal. Then Aaron Rodgers, I have ranked 11th, so does the experts, going up against Miami. Super high upside in that game. Didn't come through last week, so hopefully he can right that fantasy ship and come through this week in a game where they might not be able to run as much as they were able to previously. Now on to the scraps, and I did mixed last week, leaning towards the good-ish, so just giving myself the benefit of the doubt, but I did good, I did bad. So, Deshaun Watson this week is in my scraps list. I have him ranked 24th. The ECR on him is 18th. He hasn't let me down yet while putting him in the scraps. So, we're going to do it one more time because the experts keep being high on him, even though this week he's going up against New Orleans in that terrible weather game. I don't want to trust it. So, let's move on to Tyler Huntley, who I've ranked 28th. The ECR on him is 24th, going up against Atlanta. Pretty good matchup, right? Looks good. He just hasn't really done very good this year. I could see myself getting this one wrong, I'll say that much. But I'm not overly excited, and that should be, I think that's an weather game, so that won't help things out to expect them to lean on the run a fair bit. And as far as the DFS value plays, last week I did Nope, and this week I'm going to give you the name Gardner Minshew because his pricing is truly rock bottom. And so last week I really went for it with a lot of low pricing guys, and we're going to try and get it right this week because you're going to see I did not do good with the DFS plays last week, outside of the tight ends at least. And even there, I didn't really help you win. So we're trying to go for that guy who saves you a lot of money and helps you win instead of just holding up some sort of value for the cost. Now let's move on to the running backs. And for these steals, I did good on a 1-for-1 basis. The other one, it did not count. This week, I'm going to give you the name Isaiah Pacheco. And I have him ranked 17th. ECR is 23rd, going up against Seattle. Really bad rushing defense. I know Jerick McKinnon. So actually, here's the fun thing. Watch this. So I've got Isaiah Pacheco, Jeff Wilson here. In the steals, look at the scraps. We got Jerick McKinnon, Raheem Mostert. So expecting a lot of shared backfields, and I'm making my calls as to the more traditional running backs having success against these two defenses. That's a lot of what it comes down to. So, like Isaiah Pacheco a lot this week against Seattle, expect him to find more success and for them not to, not to be a Jerick McKinnon week as it has been as of recently. That doesn't mean I have him ranked terribly, though. There is still a lot of upside that's happened recently that you can't overlook. Now, as far as Jeff Wilson goes, I have him ranked 30th, 16 spots ahead of the ECR. The ECR number is 46th. Part of the reason for that is that we don't know for sure if Jeff Wilson's playing, okay? It's possible that he won't be playing this week, or it's possible that we get news that he's going to be active, but not going to be very involved in the game plan. Obviously, if things like that come out, change your opinion on a player. I don't have access to the future information yet. I'm making a call on what I think will be happening, and I think Jeff Wilson will be starting and will be healthy enough to get a good amount of carries in a against in a matchup where I think that the traditional running back will find a lot of success. So going up against Green Bay, I like Jeff Wilson this week a fair bit. Now let's just go on to the scraps. And last week I did pretty darn mixed. This week we're going to go for it with the opposite ends here. So I spoke about Jerick McKinnon, why I think it's going to be not so much his week, but as you can see, I still have him ranked quite well. I am 8 spots behind the ECR, however, on that. So that is the reason for him being down here in the scraps, even though I still have him as a RB2 this week. Then Raheem Mostert, just borderline RB2 flex starter compared to a RB2 pretty solidly by the experts going up against Green Bay. One of these two running backs is going to have a big week there in Miami. I'm just making my call. I think it's going to be Jeff Wilson. So now on to the stock running backs, and I think I did good. There, I had a way I wanted to say that, but I did pretty good. I did pretty good. So let's try to do that again at least. And this week I'm going to give you, and the experts are going to give you, David Montgomery, ranked 22nd, ranked 23rd, going up against Buffalo. And so I can't remember if this was, I have a gut feeling that this was more of a, due to his start percentage, an apprehensiveness about the start. So whatever the case, he's ranked as a back end RB2. Just keep that in mind. Then for J.K. Dobbins, I have him ranked 22nd. The ECR is 19, so 3 spots behind the ECR, but going up against Atlanta, and I think you can have quite a bit of trust in that. Do like J.K. Dobbins this week a fair bit. Which will bring us to the DFS value play, and last week I did Nope. This week, we're going to try and do better than Nope with Zach Moss, who is super, super cheap, and then also my steals here are quite well priced for how much I like them. So Isaiah Pacheco, Jeff Wilson, I think you could slot in for a decent price there. But if you're looking for super cheap with some upside, Zach Moss could come through for you very nicely. Now on to the wide receivers, and for the steals, I did really bad last week, and I'm pretty sure we had Christian Watson up here. So I'm going back to the well. I think I have done a terrible job of calling Christian Watson, outside of saying that you should draft him. Of course, even that, if you drafted him, you probably were like me and you ended up having to drop him at some point before he came through for you this season. But that was in part due to injury, so that wasn't really a bad call. That was definitely not a bad call, but it could have been an even better call. Christian Watson, I've ranked 8th. The ECR is 16th, 8 spots ahead of the ECR, going up against Miami. Way too much upside for me with an upside guy. I'm excited about the potential this week. He projected insanely after, it's so weird, he was projecting quite well, very well, too highly over the past few weeks due to his production and his numbers and my formula for the projections. But then he goes out and he doesn't have a great fantasy week last week. But in part, I'm sure, due to the matchup, I had to double check and make sure I didn't improperly enter in any of his stats. He projected to be the number one wide receiver this week, was shocking to me. Don't know why that was, but that obviously has some sort of influence too on my thoughts, and I'm sure that has something to do with how Miami plays defense and how it just edged him over several guys this week. I don't know, it was weird, but the projections absolutely loved Christian Watson this week, so looking for that to come through and get some people into their championships. Very much could be a championship getter-inner going up against Miami. The world is his oyster. Now on to Brandon Cooks, who I have ranked 37th. ECR is 90th. Going up against Tennessee is just announced late yesterday that he's likely to play, so the experts are going to be behind on this, but they're going to be a little too high on Chris Moore and too low on Brandon Cooks, in my opinion. Going up against Tennessee, it's a really, really good matchup, and that's the main reason that he's ranked 37th. It's not necessarily that I'm super excited to get Brandon Cooks out there, but as far as a flex option goes, especially in deeper leagues, he is not a bad option, being mostly because of this matchup and because of what we've seen Chris Moore be able to do in that role, even though Brandon Cooks really didn't do it a whole lot this season. Hopefully he could this week if you were to need to rely on him. Now let's move on to the stocks, and I had mixed results last week. This week, let's see how we can do. I have Darius Slayton ranked 26th. The ECR is 30th on him, going up against Minnesota, so obviously somebody to keep an eye on. I believe he just has a really low start percentage, so wanted to point that out. Then Gabe Davis, somebody who I think has a higher start percentage than Darius Slayton, wanted to point out, we have him lower, both the experts and I, going up against Chicago. It's a good matchup, but that is going to be one of the more poor weather games there, and so the wind has a lot to do with that, and so the deep balls really may be hard. I wanted to love Gabe Davis this week, but there's concerns with that weather. So let's move on to these scraps, and this one's super easy. Just in general, blanket statement here. More so the receivers than tight ends, but all receiving options for Cleveland and New Orleans. Be super apprehensive about starting. It's a risky thing to get into with those guys. So let's finish this up with the DFS value plays. I'm going to give you a name that I don't know that you're going to see anywhere else. So last week I did Nope again. It was not a good week for the DFS value plays. Once again, pointed that out to you before we went over them, that it was there were a lot of long shots last week, and I'm pretty much going back at it for the most part with the long shots this week, starting off with Derek Young of Seattle. He only cost $4,500, which I believe was the cheapest that a wide receiver could cost. To have a couple of those guys who are like the cheapest at the position of anything. Yeah, Derek Young was a super fascinating profile coming into the draft this last season. Hella upside, and he looks like he looked good in a small sample size last week. He had a catch, an almost catch right along the sideline. Don't believe it was a catch in the end, but really should have been if the quarterback had just placed it perfectly. Super excited about the upside. This is a guy who could give you just 2 receptions only, but a lot of yards, 70, 80 yards, and 2 touchdowns. That could be possible. I think he'll get a chance to be on the field more, and hopefully he'll get a few targets out of that in that game. On to Allen Lazard here, who provides some nice upside at 6,400. Just wanted to provide a more normal name here at least once, and so I like those Green Bay receivers going up against Miami in a game where Miami's not getting any kind of weather advantage. The weather's going to be cooler in Florida this weekend, and so that is it. Once again, rankings up on the website, or just come visit me live for Start Sit questions. Merry Christmas to you if I don't see you before then, and of course have a happy pre-Christmas Eve. That was tough. Bye-bye.